always alone. You will always be there. Always alone. You will always be there. Always alone. You will always be there. Always alone. Always alone. You will always be there. Always alone. You will always be there. Always alone. You will always be there. Always alone.
Welcome to church.
We're so excited you're joining us today. You are joining in with people from right across the world, from Asia to Africa to Europe to right here in North America.
So get ready, get expectant, and
Let's do church!
Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day. Happy Father's Day. Happy Father's Day. Happy Father's Day. Happy Father's Day. Dada. Happy Father's Day. Happy Daddy.
Happy Father's Day and welcome to church. It's so great that you're here with us, especially if you're here for the first time. I'm Shana.
And I'm Praveen, and we are the campus pastors of Freedom Chennai here in India. And we're so glad that you could make it from all around the world.
If you're here for the first time, make sure you catch up with all that's happening on social media or even on YouTube.
Yeah, that's right. Not only can you catch up, but you can also get involved.
Yep.
We have midweek groups, we have the daily devotionals, we have the prayer app, and so many other exciting things that we've lined up through the week.
If you're new to Freedom, you have to know that we love to have fun.
That's right.
And especially at a time like this.
Yeah, last week we launched our prank challenge.
Yeah.
And it's been brilliant.
Absolutely.
To see all the fun and the videos that you've been putting up online. Check a few of them out.
So, Mum is upstairs and me and Dad are going to try and scare her. This is our prank. Got you that time. Yes!
Hey Freedom Church, you will remember from our event last week the story of how my eldest daughter replaced my delicious tea bags with gross peppermint tea bags, meaning I had the most disgusting cup of tea. Here's the thing, she hasn't remembered who I am. She hasn't remembered that you don't mess with the messer. And so she's out for an hour, her dad has taken her and her brothers and sisters out, and I'm going to wrap her entire bedroom in foil and brown paper. Are you ready? Let's do this. Oh, hi girls.
What on earth? Oh.
What has Mum done?
Remember when you changed my tea bags, dear? Freedom Church, this is for you. So am I forgiven?
Yeah, maybe.
We love it. Keep them coming and we'll show you some more next week.
Last week, we heard an incredible preach from Josh
Yes.
Nozel about how we've got to speak out what God is speaking into the world right now.
And this week, some of our guys in the UK in our Worcester campus have created this in response, and we would love to share that with you.
I see a picture of a building being renovated. You know, the kind where they hang a big piece of fabric over the side of the building with a picture of what it's going to look like when it's finished. Only to see that when you pull it back, there's just a derelict old building. That's what's happening in the world right now. There are lots of things that people place their hope in, their security in, things that were stable and considered safe and strong. Finance, work, power, busyness. But these things are like that fake veneer. And this time, this season, it's like it's being pulled back, and around the world, people are falling and stumbling as we realise that the foundations we built our very lives on can crumble and aren't everlasting. God's using this time to change the landscape, to remodel the architecture of the world around us. There's an undercurrent of revolution that's rising. The picture I saw was as people stumble and fall backwards and realise that so much of what their lives are built on is breakable. They discover what's been there all along. The foundations of God's Word, pillars of truth, hope, love, justice, the church, eternity. These pillars have been laid by the church, by Christians who have prayed, and by Christians and the church today who shine a light on them as they speak about truth, as they shout out about hope, life, eternity, promise, as they speak up for the way. God is pulling back the fakery to reveal the architecture of heaven hidden in plain sight. But if we don't tell, if we don't share, if we don't speak up, then this new landscape, this new architecture won't be as clear. The opportunity is ours. The moment is now, where we get to be tour guides to what God is revealing on earth. If we don't speak up, if we don't use our voice, then the voices of others, of other gods, of other ways will be louder, and people will get lost once more. It says in Ecclesiastes that God has placed eternity in the hearts of every person. It's our opportunity to call it out in what we say, in how we live, in the way we draw near to God in these days. It doesn't look like preaching on a stage, but in walking with integrity in our lives. The call remains, but the track looks different.
We love the creativity that's
Yes.
in our church. Guys, keep it coming.
It's so powerful to speak out hope and truth, but honestly, the last 4 months have been challenging.
That's right.
And in some parts of the world, it's not getting easier.
Yeah, here in India, unfortunately, our battle with the coronavirus is getting worse.
Yeah.
We're expecting it to hit the peak in mid-November with a potentially huge impact in our city. So church, can you be praying for us?
But in the challenge, God is still doing incredible things.
That's right.
And as we move forward, we want to stay in touch with what's happening all around the world. So we're going to hear a bit more about what's happening in our world right now.
Hey everybody! So as we all know, there is so much that is going on in our world right now, from the incredibly challenging to the outright ridiculous. And of course, there have been some wonderful, heartwarming moments along the way. So businesses all over the world have been affected by COVID-19, and there's one restaurant in South Florida that did some renovation work because obviously they couldn't have customers coming into the restaurant, and they found a wedding ring, and they posted a picture of the ring with the initials of the couple on Facebook. It went viral and they managed to track the ring back to the guy in New York. And this is a couple that went to the restaurant 3 years previously and they thought they'd lost the ring forever. So talking of the outright ridiculous, there is a bakery in Finland that stopped themselves from going into financial ruin by creating a novelty toilet roll cake. Basically, they got on the bandwagon that everybody was panicking that they couldn't find loo roll, and they thought, I know what will bring the customers in, making a toilet roll cake. This cake has done so well, they sold the first 5 cakes within the hour. Then it became a social media sensation that they had so many orders coming in, and then they had to employ 2 more people to help them make the cakes to meet the demand. So if you're after one, why don't you take a visit to Finland? So I'm sure there are lots of you that are very disappointed to find out that the Tokyo Olympics has been postponed to next year. But there is a family in North Carolina that have taken it upon themselves to start their very own quarantine Olympics. This family have taken the internet by storm and are inspiring many people to start their own sporting activities within the home. They've had over 20 million views on their social media of their ridiculous antics, and clearly lots of people are getting on board. So why don't you start your very own, I don't know, badger race in the garden? So on a more serious note, we know that this time has been challenging for so many people, and here in the UK it's Loneliness Awareness Week. It's been amazing to see so many people connecting into church, but we know that this week is a tough reminder for lots of people of just how hard this time has been. So make sure that you are reaching out to those that are in your community. But all around the world today, we have Father's Day, and what an opportunity to celebrate just how amazing our dads are. For those that are still with us and those that have passed away, we love you. And a special shout out to my dad, the one and only Nigel Marsh, who is an absolute hero. Thank you, dads. And here is a special video from our kids.
There are just so many things that I love about my father. I love my father because he takes very good care of me and I like playing with him. Bye! I love my father. He's loving. He's loving. You go to hugs, kisses and listen to the lady rides. Love you. I love my dad because he always plays some games with me. I love my father. He's smart. He's smart. When I am alone and lonely, he always be with me till I'm happy. I love my dad because he always goes pond catching and is very kind to me.
You say Dada?
Our dad is great because he takes good care of us. He loves us. He's funny. He's kind. We hope you have a nice day and thank you for everything that you do for us. My dad is great because he takes care of me. I love my father because he loves me so much. He calls me his little princess. He takes me upstairs to look at the stars. He gives me lots of cuddles that makes me feel nice. Thank you. He's working for us because he plays a lot with us. When he tells me a bedtime story, he acts it and brings it to life. My dad is great at playing basketball. Happy Father's Day. My daddy is great because he takes me for shopping. He's great at everything.
My father is great because he's helpful and bravery, and father is great because he's strong.
He takes me on these amazing bike rides, which is so fast and thrilling. So funny.
Is your daddy strong and funny?
Yeah, funny. I love Dad because he's funny and he's smart and he's nice sometimes.
My dad is great because he's kind and very funny.
I love my dad so much.
He makes up his little painted tips all over us.
What else do you love about Daddy?
Penguin.
Penguins?
Wrestlers.
What else do you like about Daddy?
Dinosaurs. I love my daddy because he gives us cuddles and gets us chocolates.
I love Dad because he's very funny and he has a good sense of humor, and he's patient, he's gentle.
I love my dad because he loves me and he plays with me and he spends time with me. I love you, Daddy.
We love you.
We love you.
I love you, Daddy.
We love you, dads, and are so thankful for you all.
Come on. Being a dad is a huge thing.
Yeah.
And I love it. It reminds me so much of the power of God being our Father.
Yeah.
It also reminds me, imagine if we could do so much for our children, how much more will our Heavenly Father do for us?
Absolutely. We're going to listen to a song right now from our church in Raleigh, North Carolina. And it's all about how God, as a father, moves in our lives.
That's right. And after that, we're going to see a life-changing story of what God has done in the life of one of our new dads in our church. So open your hearts for God to move.
Like a rushing wind, the day that you came in, I was swept up in this love that filled my soul. You took my broken parts, mended in your heart. With just a word, you turned my chaos into calm. And now I know it's true, I'm chosen by you. You're making all things new. I have not been given the spirit of fear, for the words that you have spoken have drawn me near. I'm assured by what you promise, despite what I see. 'Cause you fathered the orphan in me. The cross was just the start of knowing who you are. The veil was torn apart so I could come back home. Now death, where is your sting? Fear has no hold on me, for I'm a child of God. He calls me his own. And now I know it's true, I'm chosen by you. You're making all things Father, you are friend. You are Father, you are friend indeed. 'Cause you fathered the orphan in me. And you are Father, you are friend. You are Father, you are friend. You are Father, you are friend indeed. 'Cause you fathered the orphan in me. And you are Father, you are friend. And you are Father, you are friend. And you are Father, you are friend indeed. 'Cause you fathered the orphan in me. I have not been given a spirit of fear, for the words that you have spoken have drawn me near. I'm assured by what you promised, despite what I see. Yeah, you fathered the orphan in me.
I always wanted to join the Special Forces, ever since I was in school. It was my dream to be an elite SAS soldier. I had this indescribable desire deep inside of me to test myself against others. I joined the army in 1996 at the age of 16. I'd heard all of these stories about the SAS, this British Special Forces elite unit who carried out top secret missions. They only took the best of the best, and to get in you had to pass one of, if not the hardest, physical human tests ever created. Only 7% of people who would even try would get through. But I could not get rid of this desire to go for selection, and so in 2005 I started the process. First, I had to pass a 12-month-long reserve selection. I did that. I then served a further year until I was allowed to go for regular SAS selection. I got all the way through the worst bits, miles upon miles up and down the Welsh mountains in the most extreme of weather conditions, followed by horrendous physical tests in the arduous terrain of the Brunei jungle, only to get back and to go in front of the training officer and be told that I had failed. It's one of those moments I will never forget. I was speechless. I felt sick. I'd pushed myself to the absolute limits, and at the end, it still wasn't enough. I felt so embarrassed to tell anyone I had failed. I was given the opportunity to come back and try again, but before that, I went out on an operational tour to Afghanistan. The tour was hard. I lost 3 friends, and I was almost killed myself in an explosion. All after failing to reach my goal, my dream. I went for it again. And on my second attempt, I'd managed to get through to the jungle phase. And in the 4th week, on a particular day's training, I collapsed and nearly died with heat exhaustion. I was evacuated by helicopter to an A&E hospital. That was the second attempt over for me. It took me a year to recover and pass the test required to get signed off by the medical board to be approved to reattempt selection for the 3rd time. Immediately, I started to train harder than ever before. I'd spend 3 days a week running over the mountains, enhancing my navigation and fitness. Every night, I'd spend hours studying tactics. It was 2011, and there I was on my 3rd attempt. The hills, the jungle, interrogation. I passed and achieved my dream. It was like being a king. Nothing could stop me. I controlled my life and determined the outcome, and often determined the outcome of the lives of others. I was living the dream. As an SAS soldier, I always held this very unique posture, a mix of extreme confidence, yet narcissism, with a lot of arrogance. Even with all that I've achieved, I was completely lost and broken. I was empty inside, incomplete, despite achieving one of the greatest human feats anyone can do. I could keep shoving it down and denying it, or open up to a new future. The typical image of an elitist creates an ego, and it's not long before you think you're invincible, untouchable, that you hold life and death in your own hand. During the last years in the SAS, I met this girl called Naomi. She was going to church one Sunday, and I thought, I'll go with her. It's only church, it's only an hour. For me, coming to Freedom Church for the first time was a very strange experience. It was like going to a nightclub during the daytime, yet I wasn't drunk. I remember keep being hugged time and time again and thinking, this is weird. We ended up going back 3 or 4 more times before I went away on an operational deployment to Iraq. My time in Iraq was very different from the times before. I had questions, and I was looking for something, but I didn't know what it looked like. All this death, this indulgence, the life I had known, yet I kept asking the same question. Is this it? I came back to Hereford on leave for 2 weeks. Me and Naomi came to church, and during a message we were incredibly challenged by Pastor G, which started something deep within inside us. During this time, Naomi really had to put up with a lot of issues that I had going on. I had this very deep rage within me. My heart at the time had hardened after so many years of learning to shut down my emotions, as I viewed them as weakness. I was an atheist most of my career, and I boldly said that the Bible was written by man to control man, and that God didn't exist. On an operational tour in the deserts of Iraq, I came face to face with its author. In that moment, I had an indescribable emotional encounter with God, and everything changed. He showed me my present and my past with new revelation. He showed me the world as he saw it, and told me what my future could look like as I knelt before him in tears. I had suffered with PTSD for many years, and had never slept a night without waking up, shouting or kicking. The day I met Jesus, it went away without me even asking. The moment of humility broke through like no moment of my own personal success. Nothing I could craft with all the strength I could muster, all the determination I could choose, or even come closer to what God could do in a moment of humility. My life changed. He asked me to follow him and called me to plant church in Cape Town, South Africa, expanding and building his kingdom. I followed Jesus for 3 years, and he's redesigned me, completely renewed my mind, set me free of rage and obsessive control, showed me how to trust him as my provider and my protector, trained me in using his spiritual gifts, and accepted me as his son. But this year, he gave me a new heart in giving me a daughter. And for the first time, I felt the unconditional love of my Father in heaven. You have a choice, your strength or his, your ability or his, your pride or his humility, life or death, physical life and death versus spiritual life or death. Choosing to follow Jesus is above everything else the best thing I've ever done.
What an incredible story of just how powerful these moments of encounter with God can be, changing our lives in ways that often we can't imagine. But it's also an epic story, isn't it, of just how far as human beings we'll push ourselves in the pursuit of the things that we want. You know, when I hear stories like Kev's, it always makes me ask those questions. Could I do it? Have I got what it takes? It taps into that bit of you that wants to almost push your limits and see if you've got it. You know, it's almost like that part of us that desires to be, I don't know, heroic, isn't it? And it's Father's Day today. And I think, hey, dads around the world, admit it. Like me, we all want to be a bit of a hero, don't we? Or at least we want our kids to think we are. It's why we find it hard to back down from challenges. We don't like to let them win the context, even if, you know, it would encourage them. You know, it's hard, isn't it? Or, you know, those moments at the school races where you just want to win. Or that simple moment where you open the jar that your kid couldn't and they look at you like you're Superman. It taps into something about us as human beings where there's this incredible drive within us, isn't it? human beings as a species, we're fascinating. You read or watch documentaries about people climbing Everest and people going through all kinds of different things, and you just think, this is just incredible, unbelievable. There's this drive for adventure, invention, creativity, this aspiration. Maybe right now you don't feel like that's your life. Perhaps you feel distinctly average, or maybe you even feel more defined by your failures than your successes. But this drive, it's still in you. You know, if you ask a kid what they want to be when they grow up, rarely do they give you an answer that's rooted in reality or their experiences. They'll tell you they want to be an international sports player, an astronaut. There is this drive and vision within us as human beings that just makes us different. You know, after all, if we're just here to survive, if our whole purpose is just to make it through to another generation, why do we do these things to ourselves as humanity? See, I think it's because it's yet another mark of the spark of God within us. The Bible says that you and I are more than just flesh and bones. It says that actually we were set apart from the rest of the world around us. And that's why within humanity runs these things of love and feelings and, you know, sacrifice and all these different elements that make us different from the natural order of things. I believe that spirit of adventure and invention and creativity, even the aspiration and vision that can consume us as human beings, it actually comes from the heart of God. I believe it's a reflection of the more that's in him that's in us as well. After all, if God exists, you know, he'd be the most adventurous, visionary, aspirational being in the whole universe. Think about it. He dreamt up Everest before anybody had seen a mountain. He thought about and imagined the Milky Way before we'd seen any stars. This drive and vision, it comes from him. But there's this line that we cross so quickly as human beings. It's where the drive and aspiration turns into our own coronation. You know, to coronate means to crown, to make something or someone king or queen. You know, is it wrong to celebrate success? Is it wrong to encourage? No, we're a church of honor and a church of encouragement. We love to celebrate when we see people do incredible things. But there's this line that we cross where our drive turns into pride. You know, even Kev talked about it in his story, this whole moment of great endurance leading to a significant achievement, but also bringing out in him almost this sense of maybe even arrogance or self-reliance. And yet there can be something so dangerous about that as well. You know, pride, what is it? It's when we elevate ourselves. It's when we live for our own elevation. It's when we reserve ourselves the final say and we put walls up to challenge. Now, I think even about being a dad, and so often as dads, we can be guilty of this, can't we? We can often equate being a hero as being somebody that always gets it right and never struggles, doesn't show weakness, and don't you dare ever admit you're lost.
Where are we?
Gorwithy.
Are you lost?
Nope.
Are you sure?
Yep.
Anybody got any idea where we are?
Look, we're near the, we go that way and then end up at the cottage.
All right.
You know, even recently for us as a family, we were out driving somewhere and I was convinced I knew a better route than Saz, and so I go that route and I quickly get lost. Saz clearly knows that I'm lost and says, "You're lost, aren't you?" It's like, "No." "Where are we?" "We're on our way home." "Where?" "On our way." You know, and I know that sometimes they're just funny little things that we do like that, but they often point towards this deeper flaw within us as humanity to rely on ourselves, to embrace and even get consumed by our own kingship, our own coronation, our own pride. And the reason I think this is so important in a season we find ourselves in right now is because all around the world, I think humanity's kind of been humbled in the last few months, haven't we? You know, here we are, coronavirus, a microscopic, invisible enemy that's managed to shut down stock markets, that's turned the world's most magnificent cities into ghost towns. It's put the drive of humanity on hold. And, You know, in some of our nations, we're beginning to move out of that. And in some, we're not even have hit the worst of it yet. But it's almost like this reminder, isn't it? It's this humbling reminder that as people, yes, humanity is inventive, creative, awesome, innovative. And yeah, we're going to move forward. We're going to become smarter. We're going to become more able. And I believe that God's written that capacity within us. But it's this reminder that we're not gods. That actually we can't click our fingers and just change it all. But it's also this convicting challenge about what we put our hope in. The things that we use to crown ourselves, the self-reliance. You see, if you look at human history, it's really the tale of mankind trying to be godlike. I know that might sound strange, but if you really look through it, we'll see story after story of people trying to make a kingdom of themselves and for themselves. And you know, hundreds of years ago, that was particularly relevant to the rulers and the emperors and the dictators. But actually, even within our world today, we kind of still do it, don't we? The careers we chase. Even here in England, people will say an Englishman's home is his castle. It's the idea that, you know, even if my home is relatively small in comparison to some big world ruler, it's my place and my kingdom and my domain and what I've built. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with taking encouragement in where we've progressed and moved forward, but there's something so dangerous about pride. Have you ever heard the name Ozymandias? Now, probably you haven't. I can't imagine that there's too many children in our communities that have got that name, but if you do, cool. What an awesome name. But Ozymandias is the name of a character in history, a real person. And they were an emperor, a ruler in Egypt about 1200 to 1300 years before Jesus. And Ozymandias, he had this level of self-importance. He thought he was a god. And so he had his whole empire building statues and buildings in honor of his kingship. But the reason I know the name is that there's a poem written about 100 years ago. And it's this powerful poem that really talks about his legacy in ruins. On these statues, he used to have written, "King of Kings, all who look upon me fear." Yet this poem walks through this powerful reality that these statues are now ruins and wrecks left in the desert, and people don't even know his name anymore. You see, there's something about humanity, something about all of us that wants to leave our mark, isn't there? Whether it's the family name or it's some kind of a legacy. And yet often we think that leaving our mark will happen best through the greatest achievements we can possibly do. Yet there's one person in human history that has marked it, changed it, and transformed it in an unparalleled way, like no one else. You see, whether you believe he is who he said he is or not, Jesus Christ has had the greatest singular impact on our world, bar none. In fact, even if you're here for the first time and maybe you're not a Christian, so much of what you think and you do and even you value comes right back down to things he did and he taught. There's no one that can even compare to the level of influence. You know, this carpenter from nowhere has managed to mark history. But how did he do it? He did it with the complete opposite of Ozymandias. He did it with humility. He did it by laying himself down. You see, we've got this opportunity right now in this season in 2020 for a global reset, for a global reflection and change. And the only way we're really going to see that happen is on the path of humility. You know, Ozymandias, that's his Greek name, but his Egyptian name was Ramesses II. And if you know anything about biblical history, it was Ramesses II was the pharaoh that Moses had to go to and demand that he would set God's people free. It was this same ruler whose legacy is lost in the desert, who thought pride would build himself a kingdom forever. It's him that we don't remember. Instead, the humble man, unqualified, unconfident Moses. You see, humility is the currency of heaven. And yet so often we're dealing in the currency of pride. In Philippians chapter 2, we see some incredible verses about Jesus and humility. Let's take a look at it. Chapter 2, I'm going to start in verse 5. It says this: your attitude, our mindset, our approach should be the same as that of Jesus Christ, who, even though he was being the very nature of God, let's just pause there for a second. Jesus was God. Jesus had all the glory, all the splendor, all the might, all the power, all the resources. That's what it meant to be God. Even though he was the very nature of God, he did not consider equality with God something to be grasped. And what that word grasped means in the original is mean something to be held onto, something that was, he couldn't let go of. And then verse 7, but instead made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in the appearance of man, of woman, of you and I, and all our flaws, our failings. Think about Jesus was born in the most humble of circumstances, lowered himself further than he could have possibly gone. In that likeness, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. The cross was this humiliating place. It wasn't just agonizing. It wasn't just painful. It was the worst kind of death you could have experienced at the time. And these verses say that Jesus, who really was the King of Kings, who really was the Lord of all, marked history not because he held on, but because he surrendered and laid it down. You see, right now as humankind, we've got an opportunity to hit reset and humble ourselves, to come back to God. But we've got to start to challenge the pride that so easily has become centric to many of our lives. When I think about pride, I often think of it like a credit card. And maybe you've never had a credit card, but it's this facility that a bank will let you spend money as long as you pay it back. And so a credit card appears to have value. You're spending on it, buying things, but actually it's just putting you in debt. And not just putting you in debt, but then charging you interest. You see, when we spend out in our lives through pride, it can have the appearance of value, but it's actually just putting us in debt. And not just debt, but debt upon debt. Whereas humility is the currency of heaven. It actually returns more than you could ever spend out. As a family, we've got a couple of different bank accounts, and one of them is a reward account. And what that means is that when we go and spend in certain places, the bank actually gives us more money back. It's exactly like that with humility. You spend it and it actually brings far more back in return. And yet for many of us as humankind, we are more inclined to hold on in pride. We're more inclined to want to chase down our own crown than lay them down. And we see this so often in our world. Even in the last 50 to 100 years, fewer and fewer people almost being open to the idea of God, often because we have been accepting of this idea that we don't need anyone. But the last 4 months, I think, have challenged that, haven't they? They remind us of our place in this world and this universe, and actually we need and are part of something so much bigger. So often with humility, we struggle with it because it requires sacrifice. There's a couple of key problems we've got with pride. You see, pride shuts out the option of kind of ever being wrong. It puts up these walls around us and says, I'm right, I know this, and I'm not moving. But the reality is, since when were you or I always right? And yet pride, it becomes like this armor, and we put up these walls and we raise up these shields, but we don't know that we're not actually protecting ourselves in doing that, but sometimes we're even harming ourselves. You see, pride puts up these walls, but humility tears them down. See, pride draws lines around how you and I understand ourselves. It makes us inaccessible to change. But again, I don't know about you, but I don't know everything I need to know right now. There's this humility that can keep us open to growth and change, and even open us up to things that perhaps we don't even understand. You see, pride can kill off things in our lives that we don't even realize. You know, we think about Kev's story. You know, never even realized the world and the life and the transformation that was available to him, sometimes simply because these walls of his own self-belief, his own self-achievement, perhaps created a barrier to that. You see, even now in the world, we use this word pride to defend ourselves, to define and even celebrate ideas of how we understand ourselves to be. But the problem is that when we do that, we don't realize as humankind, we're raising ourselves up to a height and an elevation we can't sustain, and we're not even made for. You see, this word pride is such a dangerous thing. Again, like I said, is it wrong to take encouragement when we do something right or do something well? No, but we got to understand that if we want to be followers of Jesus, and not only that, if we want to live the lives that we know are possible, it's going to take the transformational path of humility. I want to ask you today a really challenging question. What has pride cost you? Maybe even what is pride costing you right now? You know, it's a heavy question. It's a deep question. But these are days, are they not, of possible reflection and transformation? And if we're scared to ask these challenging questions, we're never going to dig out the gold of potential within ourselves. Even as we think about recent events around racism, so much of that has been able to stay in place because of the pride of men and women in years gone by. There's this humility we've got to embrace if we're going to start to be able to walk in the true path of Jesus. Let's look at these verses again, because they give us not only this inspirational picture of Christ, they also give us the ingredients of how we can walk in his footsteps. Let's pick up verse 6 again. Who, being the very nature of God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, to be held onto. You see, I think pride often works in our life by causing us to hold on to things that we need to let go of. If you want to become a man or woman, a person of humility, a follower of Jesus, marking history in the way he did, you got to learn to let go. What are you holding on to right now that's holding you back? You know, I think that if we're going to be people of humility, we need to practice letting go. We need to actually almost make a habit of it. We need to make a discipline of it. Because so often pride will whisper in our ears, but you work so hard for that. Or what will they think if you... Whereas humility says, lay it down. Just think about it. Jesus, who being the nature of God, is able to lay it all down for you and for me. There's something so powerful that we've got to learn to let go. But the next bit, isn't it interesting, this phrase, he didn't consider equality with God something to be held on to. Isn't it true that for so often in human history, when we really think about it, we're kind of desiring and searching for that God-like status, the equality with God. And this drive within us, it comes all the way back to the beginning. Because we believe as Christians that there's God and he's good, but there's also this enemy, the devil. The Bible teaches us that he didn't start out bad. The Bible teaches us that, in fact, actually, he was a good angel, close with God, in fact, in charge of worship. But at some point, this desire for equality with God got some traction in his own life. The Bible says that on account of his own pride and beauty, he wanted what was God's. You see, as humankind, we're repeating the same process. In fact, the Bible teaches us that humankind fell at this very temptation. If you eat this apple, your eyes will be open and you'll be like God. This whole desire for equality with God has run within us since the beginning of time. There's this story right at the beginning of the Bible called the Tower of Babel. And it was when humankind wanted to build this great tower for their own splendor, to reach up to the heavens so they could be like God. And we're still doing it today, aren't we? Skyscrapers built. And, yes, some of it's about art and engineering and awesome just feats of achievement. But there's something that runs underneath it. And it's this human desire for equality with God. And yet, actually, the problem is as we're reaching for that in the way that we are, we're actually robbing ourselves of the very closeness with God that we could have through humility. It's incredible. The verses don't stop there. But in verse 9, it says, after Jesus had been obedient to death on a cross, verse 9, and therefore God has exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name. It's that in Jesus humbling himself, he was actually able to take hold of the very thing we're searching for by living these lives of pride, this closeness with God. You see, that drive within us, it's not a wrong thing. It's going to drive us towards desiring and chasing after God. But if we're doing it for our own glory, we're going to miss it entirely. Where are there areas in your life, in my life, that we're almost chasing after our own crowns? In fact, and actually we need to have to chase after the crown of Christ. Rose talked about it a few weeks ago, these crowns of life. But are you trying to make your own, or are you chasing after God's? So what did Jesus do? And what do we need to do? Well, let's go back to verse 6 and verse 7. It says here that he made himself nothing, that he humbled himself in verse 8. You see, so often we look for our circumstances and events in our life to humble ourselves, but actually we need to be doing that before our circumstances and our scenarios need to humble us. If we want to be people of humility, we've got to make a practice of humbling ourselves. What's that look like? It looks like recognizing our flaws. It looks like recognizing we can't do it all on our own. It looks like saying sorry. It looks like confessing and repenting. It looks like asking for help. How true is this, like I said, so often for us dads? Asking for help is like the cardinal sin. But it's a small part of how we end up missing this beautiful, powerful, God-designed tool of humility in our lives. You see, from this moment, humanity could choose to just go back to our own kingdom, that we can do it on our own. Or we could embrace the reality that we're not God's, that actually we need him. You see, humility is the path, it's the gateway to God's power moving in our world. God says again in his word, doesn't he? If my people would humble themselves and pray, I'd listen, hear, and answer. You see, humility is the gateway to the power of God working in our world. And I want to charge us, church, I want to charge us to be people of humility like never before. I want us to be people that run from those areas and elements of pride. Pride will kill us. We've got to have nothing to do with it. But be humble people. And I'm not talking about walking around feeling sorry for ourselves, never taking encouragement, never recognizing our wins. No. You see, I believe the primary fruit of humility is confidence. If we know that it's not about us, it's not on us, I don't know about you, but that actually gives me peace and gives me confidence. That actually I'm trusting in something so much bigger than my own capacity, something so much bigger than my own best efforts can even get close to. That gives me confidence. We need to be the voice calling out, bringing people back to humility. It's something so powerful at stake here for our world and for our communities. You see, I love these final verses of this section. Let me read them to you again. Verse 9. Therefore, God has exalted Jesus to the highest place, gave him the name above every name, that at that name of Jesus, every knee would bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. But there's a comma there, and it says, to the glory of God the Father. It blows my mind that even in the elevation of Jesus is for the glory of the Father. There's something so powerful about living our lives driven, giving the best we possibly can, going and achieving amazing things, but for the glory of God. One of the things that's been my prayer as we've been praying for the scientists and technicians working on medical responses to coronavirus has been, Lord, let it come through someone who'll acknowledge you. Your humankind is so capable and able, but it's capable and able because of that God spark within us. So this week, church, here's my question. How can you and I live in greater humility than ever before? I got 4 things that I want to encourage you to do. Firstly, I want you to make it a habit to acknowledge that you can't do it on your own. That's not an admission of defeat. In fact, it's an accessing of progress and power. Secondly, what do you need to let go of that's holding you back? Jesus said, again, he didn't see it as something to be held onto, grasped, but let it go. What are the areas of your life you can walk in just a step more sacrifice this week, opening up this path of humility? Thirdly, how can you humble yourself this week? Maybe it's being honest about something that's going on, confessing about something, sharing that maybe you're struggling, or just simply starting to ask for help. There's something that it opens up within us that's transformative. And finally, what does it say? He took the form of a servant. One of the greatest ways that we can stay humble is to find daily opportunities to serve. Husbands serving wives, wives serving husbands, children serving parents, serving in the church, serving in our communities, serving God. And do you know what I can guarantee you? Like Kev, when we embrace this humility, it will burst our lives into a colour and a spectrum we could never achieve for ourselves. It'll open up and transform the halls of our heart in ways that we can't fathom right now. Humility is the path to God's power. It's the path to your best life. It's the path to transformation in our world. Maybe you're here today and you've never prayed that prayer like Kev did. Maybe even as I'm talking, you're being willing and humble enough to recognize that maybe you're living for yourself, and that no matter what you do, no matter how hard, it's never quite going to be enough. Well, today you've got an opportunity, just like Kev did, to meet with that same Jesus, that same humble King that has the power to transform your entire existence. And right now, as I finish up, I want to offer this opportunity to you to pray with me and to step into life with him, to give your life to Jesus. It's a simple prayer. We're going to say that we're sorry for the things we've done wrong. We're going to recognize that we need help and need forgiveness, that Jesus died and rose again, and that we're going to commit to follow him from this moment on. If you're ready to pray that prayer, would you close your eyes where you are? If you've already prayed that prayer, would you pray with me right now that God would move in homes and houses and communities all around the world with the power of salvation in this moment? Let's pray. Father, today I come to you and I recognize that I've done things wrong, that I need your forgiveness. Jesus, I ask you to forgive me. Jesus, I believe that you died and rose again for me, and today I want to commit my life to you and follow you from here on. I give my life to you. In your name I pray. Amen. If you just prayed that prayer, you have just taken the most incredible step, the most awesome decision you could ever make. Praveen and Shana going to help you know what to do as your next step. Guys, let's live out this humility. Let's mark history the way Jesus did.
If you've just prayed that prayer, we'd love to hear from you and help you take your next step.
If you're at a watch party, get in touch with your local leaders. Or if you're watching online or on YouTube, why not send us an email? We'd love to hear from you, connect with you, and help you move forward.
Guys, it's been so great to have you here with us today. We'd love for you to join us next week, or you can get involved this week too.
Absolutely. But have a great week, guys. Stay safe and see you soon.